So, welcome. This is part of the 2024 Watershed Congress virtual program. The Watershed Congress is organized by the Delaware River Keeper Network in collaboration with many organizations. My name is Elizabeth Baumstein. I'm the Member Programs and Development Associate at the Delaware River Keeper Network. I'm also your moderator for this session. Pennsylvania Science, Technology, and Engineering, Environmental Literacy, and Sustainability, which is the acronym PA STEELS, Pennsylvania's new environmental education standards. We are pleased to present our speakers for this session. Tammy Peffer, who is Environment and Ecology Content Advisor for the Pennsylvania Department of Education and has taught a variety of subjects that relate to that: biology, environmental education, and is currently working on a PhD to further her own education. We also have Michelle Niedermeyer, who is the education lead for Pennsylvania Sea Grant College Program.
Thanks for joining us. I know this is a kind of odd time of day, end of the work day, right before you commute home. But thank you for taking the time to learn a little bit. Part of what Michelle and I are going to do today is try to give you a quick overview of what the standards are, how they fit into educational programming across the state, and how you, as field professionals, non-formal educators, community members, specialists in watersheds, any of your categories, can actually help with learning process, because these new standards have some new approaches that require community effort. So we're going to just keep rolling. A lot of our work is done through a team that we call the Capacity Grant Team. We're funded by NOAA and also by Sea Grant for several of our projects. Michelle, Steve Curlin with Stroud, and I are the co-principal leads on the capacity grants that we get, and most of the work is done under this umbrella. So, as we mentioned, we're going to be talking about the new standards, and the new standards have these things called disciplinary core ideas, science and engineering practices, cross-cutting concepts. And for practitioners in the field, like people who do this every day in their job, they get it. But for education, we have to retrain teachers that education is not discipline siloed. And this is where individuals like you fit in. So we're going to be looking at how you community players can help schools best transition to teaching the new STEELS standards. How we can use a framework called Meaningful Watershed Educational Experiences to help support outdoor and lab experience learning. And how we can understand better that the STEELS and the MIWI combination help support 21st century skill development, which for you as providers of services, whether they be environmental resource specialist work or education work, you need people who understand how to work and interact, and you will have an informed public coming out of this. And then all of the work comes together in promoting the idea that we are always supposed to connect our outdoor environment to our lives, because we are part of that environment and we cannot survive without it. So just so you know where this came from, so in Pennsylvania, we not only have guidance from the Pennsylvania Environmental Education Act, but all of these jurisdictional decrees affect what we do. So even though we're focusing on the on the Schuylkill River watershed, which is my home watershed, we have guidances from the National Environmental Education Act, Chesapeake Bay Watershed Agreement, which has a whole environmental literacy component that in Pennsylvania, when it comes to resources and all the agencies, we apply that across the entire state because it's a good practice. We have guidances from the DRBC, the Susquehanna River Basin Commission, the Joint Commission, which is the Great Lakes Coalition, and then overarching and mirroring everything all at the same time, reflecting much as a crystal, we have the United Nations Sustainability Goals. So very quickly, we're framing this under the methodology and the learning science that has to do with environmental literacy and sustainability development. And we work through everything with a process that is very interdisciplinary. It's a learner-centered process. And all of our actions go from a building of awareness to collecting information and building the content knowledge around it, to developing problem solving and critical thinking skills, and on to taking environmental action in a variety of forms. I'm not going to read this slide to you, but there are a couple things that I want to point out in here. That environmental education and the STEELS standards emphasize active participation in preventing or solving environmental problems. It should be interdisciplinary. And we are looking to develop an understanding of local, national, and international cooperation, looking at in school and out of school, and continuing that learning across an entire lifetime. So educators generally need to think about how they are engaging with the information they collect and how they are engaging in science practice or engineering practices. So, you know, we're going to be investigating, we're going to be evaluating the data through these standards, just as you as practitioners in your field do. You then don't just jump to random conclusions. You need to develop explanations and solutions, and you need to fact check, you need to truth, you need to implement, and then come back around and make sure that what you're proposing is actually going to work. This is how best management practices have been developed over the years. It's iterative or spiraling. It's never a straight line. So our new standards are developed using a couple different resources, which we'll get into, but they are organized primarily into the general sciences, which is life science, physical science, earth, space science. And in the physical science, we include the chemical, physical arenas. And then we used a platform called NGSS, which is Next Generation Science Standards, which are the leading standards concepts for science education. We also added in Pennsylvania technology and engineering using guidance from ITEEA, and which is technology education, long name. We also used guidance from North American Association for Environmental Education, the Agriculture, Food, Nutrition Network, ANFR, the Ecological Society of America, and a couple other organizations to help develop these standards. Pennsylvania, when it has come to environmental education and environmental education standards, has always been ahead of the game. We were one of the first states in the nation back in '99 to have environmental education standards that included watershed concepts. And we are the first state to develop our own set of standards here that is being used as a bridge to cover science and technology. So as I was mentioning before, these are some of the foundational pieces that this came from. These standards came from, and we had an amazing team that helped write them, that went on between September of 20 all the way up until they were passed in mid 22. So there was, again, a lot of research and work that came through this process, and this is what we've developed. So in general, and this is a lot of information, really hard, really fast up front. Each standard is called a performance expectation. In Pennsylvania, they are broken into the main idea, which is the core idea, which actually used to be the kind of standard. So it's what you know. The SEPs, or the science and engineering practices, are how we do the knowing, how we get to the knowing, how we explore, how we apply our knowledge. And then the cross-cutting concepts are things that go between disciplines, and they can be things like change over time or patterns, cause and effect. So those are things that you understand and learn regardless of which discipline you are working in. So a quick overview on our standards. They're broken into subdomains and substrands. So within the subdomain of agriculture, environmental systems, and resources, we have strands such as agriculture systems, environment and ecology, environment and society, and watersheds and wetlands. Each of these standard sets goes across the grade bands and builds on each other in a chronological or a grade band structure, but they also build on each other vertically, and can interchange and relate to each other very well, because as we know, with environmental issues, it's a matrix of understanding rather than linear understanding. As we move into environmental literacy skills, we're building models, we're explaining, we're collecting and analyzing across the different regions, such as investigating environmental issues, environmental experiences, and evaluating solutions. And this is where all of us on this call need to be able to realize that your skill set is essential for these literacy skills. In particular, the environmental experiences includes pieces from what we're going to explore as the me-we in a few minutes. It includes pieces such as outdoor exploration, outdoor lab experiences, designing those experiences to collect and interpret data, and later to apply, hopefully, your solutions that you've come up with. When we look at sustainability and stewardship, I'm going to call something out to you in just a minute, but you're going to see that we're talking about sustainability in a couple different ways. We're looking at issues in the environment. We're looking at understanding give and take, overconsumption. We're looking at stewardship, and Pennsylvania is one of the first states to have an environmental justice component. And I am going to say that these standards were passed in a very conservative House when they were put through, and they passed with flying colors. So we're very proud of how they were written, because we're not telling anyone to teach with judgment. Because these are student-centered standards, the students investigate and develop their own opinions and justify their own determinations rather than us doing and telling. Okay. I'm just going to squeeze through these standards pieces really quick, and then we'll get to the fun stuff. And Michelle can help us talk about the MIWI and how you can work our way in here. So the foundation boxes, each of the standards is very sparse in the standards documents. So what Pennsylvania did was we created these things called foundation boxes, which explain really where we're trying to go with these standards. And this is the format that the NGSS has also used. So they have a performance expectation, which is further defined through these foundation boxes. So in Pennsylvania, we're just going to use this as one of the examples. So where it says students who demonstrate understanding can construct an argument to support whether action is needed on a selected environmental issue and propose solutions. Within that sentence, you have the science and engineering practice, the disciplinary core idea, and the cross-cutting concept. We provide a clarifying statement because research had demonstrated that teachers who hadn't been trained in these arenas might not understand where we're trying to go with the standard, and we felt it was essential. We also have the Pennsylvania context, which tries to frame the understanding that we feel Pennsylvania students who are Pennsylvania citizens need to be able to reflect upon, and or provides resources for the educators to use to get to that learning. And then we also provide some cross content connections, which are very important in that it helps you see links between social studies, math, English language arts. And it's really important that we start looking at education related to STEELS, the sciences, technology, engineering, environmental literacy, and sustainability, as something that is not singular, that it is more a web of knowledge than a line of knowledge, and that if we don't make those connections, we're not building the skills which move back and forth. To further demonstrate this, we see that there are different ways to represent the learning and knowing, but this environmental education continuum demonstrates too that you're going to be changing the magnitude or the quantity and or density of the work depending on the age level and grade level. But everything in all of our structures includes combinations of work. And at the center of the page on the bottom, that is a depiction of the work that we do in the learning process through the meaningful watershed educational experience. Again, a little bit about phenomena and focus. And I want you to think about how in your work, you look at things like patterns, cause and effect, scale, systems, energy and matter, and how you study it, because these are the things that we're going to ask, hopefully, you as community partners to be able to find schools in your area to help them understand how this really works in the real world, that it's not just, patterns of 3 leaves. There's more with patterns. There's more with the process. Okay. Michelle, do you want to dig into this one a little bit?
Sure. So when we're thinking about MIWI's, Meaningful Watershed Educational Experiences, you can see that there are words around the outside and words on the inside. And the words on the inside are the essential elements or are what students do. So they are investigating issues. They are helping organize and lead outdoor field experiences. Important to note, there is an S at the end of that experiences. It is plural. This is not, we take a field trip and then we're done. We are going outside in a meaningful way multiple times for outdoor field experience. They are leading synthesis and conclusions and helping to develop the environmental action projects as they see from their issues investigation. The words around the outside of the circle are the supporting practices, or what the educators do. So thinking in local context, helping the students frame things, facilitating it. So it's not, as my husband would say, free range children. These are, the teacher's still there, the educator is still there, making sure that the content and everyone is safe, and that we're moving forward in a progression. So the teachers and the educators are still facilitating and making sure that integration of learning is happening and that it is a sustained experience. Again, it's not just one and done. It's not that we just spend one day doing this. This can be a unit, this can be a week, this can be a month, this can span the entire year, but it is done in a way so that we are intentionally moving through the process with the students and making sure that it is, learner-centered. Okay.
Oops.
I think you
There we
have
go.
control there still.
Yeah, I still do.
Okay. And, here's just another way to look at that. Again, the MIWI essential elements are in that box. This is what the students do. And then we can think about it in terms of science and engineering practices and cross-cutting concepts. And so, here are just a few examples. I'm not going to read them all to you, but thinking about what are science and engineering practice? Well, we ask questions, right? This is part of being a scientist. You ask questions, you investigate, you do computations, you analyze and interpret, you develop models if needed, and then you find ways to communicate that information. Those are science and engineering practices. And we can use the cross-cutting concepts to address these as well. So cause and effect, patterns, all of these sorts of things that are part of a MIWI cover what we are also trying to do within the STEELS standards. So MIWIs, meaningful watershed educational experiences, the essential elements really do intrinsically and implicitly and explicitly cover the STEELS standards. And without a MIWI, not to hit the hammer too hard on this nail, you really won't be able to address the standards. It's critical to think about the MIWI framework as you're moving through the STEELS standards to make sure that you are applying all of these practices and concepts.
Now, this is where Michelle and I get to have a little bit of fun with you. And I'm hoping that I'm sorry, I just saw that there was a question in there and that I think we need to back up for. So what is give and take over consumption from the stewardship standard? I think before we get into phenomena, let's just think about this. When you're talking about a system, we'll use water. Okay. There is a finite amount of water. You can remove that water from a system and put it into another system, which will eventually affect the downstream. If you take too much water out of a system, it will affect the ecological functions within that system. So think about within the Delaware River Basin, you have intake, withdrawal restrictions, okay? But you also have restrictions and or guidances on how water should get back into your system. So runoff controls, things like that. Stormwater management, sewage treatment plants. So within that system, you have consumption practices and going in and out as well. And what you're trying to do is you're within the stewardship realm, you're trying to balance things so that you're not negatively impacting a situation. And that's a perfect segue for where we are going in this next section. I want to just make sure that I'm seeing things, I'm seeing questions in the Q&A and such. Let's dig into this. Michelle, do you want to do the first one?
I know that's your favorite word.
I know. Phenomena. Na, 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 na.
So phenomena. What is a phenomena? I wonder, what is a phenomena? What is an environmental problem and what is an environmental issue? And I know these things feel and sound the same, but when we dig into them here on the next 3 slides, we will see what the difference is. So let's move forward. All right, so phenomena, they are observable events. They occur in the universe, and we can use our science knowledge to explain or predict them, okay? So the example here, or the statement here is that observable phenomena that illustrate environmental problems help support student inquiry within the MIWI framework, okay? So we generally use knowledge and we build upon it in order to explain or predict. And so the idea of I wonder what is part of thinking about what are the observable events that occur in our universe that we can answer with our scientific knowledge.
One of the things that I like to think about with that phenomena, and Michelle hinted at this work, it's your wonder. You know, why does this happen? And a phenomena is not, say you're out walking through the woods finding, you know, a feather. The phenomena is not just finding the feather. The phenomena is understanding or thinking about, oh, how did this feather end up here? You know, was there a bird bite? Was there something going on? You know, did the bird molt? Well, then the phenomena is molting. So it's more than just witnessing something. It's a wondering and getting to the cause, or getting to what's it all about, or what's the pattern that's happening. Okay, environmental problems.
Okay, so this goes back to the interactions between humans and the environment. And again, going back to the idea of cause and effect. Is this problem something that puts something of value to humans at risk? Okay.
With an environmental problem, you end up having something for humans that's being put at risk. So think about a situation that's common along the Schuylkill River. You know, we have water flow that comes and goes, and sometimes it floods things. So a problem could be flooding because it's affecting something for humans. However, it's not always a problem, because sometimes you need flooding to replenish soils. You know, the floodplains, that's how soils are exchanged and such. Sometimes you need flooding to spread seeds. So for a plant that requires that, flooding is not a problem. It's when it's applied to humans. Okay, and we'll go on to issues.
Okay, so it becomes an issue when there might be a disagreement over whether it is a problem or not. So people disagree, and that could be based on different beliefs or values. And this is where educators can really facilitate whether it is an environment, you know, the environmental issue, and help the students with the problem and then with the issue. This is another opportunity for students to practice various communications and ways to resolve issues. Problem solving is a big part of solving environmental issues, and understanding others' perspectives. This can be an opportunity to talk about the differences between beliefs and values and what we know scientific evidence claims. Evidence and reasoning are a really important decision-making tool when it comes to environmental issues and environmental problems. And then, it does allow the students to explore human and natural systems and the interactions that may happen, and who may be affected and who may not, who may think it's a problem, who may not think it's an issue. And so going with Tammy's idea of flooding, the problem of flooding, is it an issue? And if so, why? What are some beliefs or values, or what is some evidence and reasoning that we could apply to a flooding issue? Would be an opportunity to explore that a little deeper.
And if we don't want to look at it as a person, a human-centric thing, there can be an environmental problem that humans don't think is a problem. And it could be something like application of pesticides. So some humans think they're the greatest thing on earth because it gets rid of the mosquitoes and the spiders and everything like that. And for them, they don't think of it as a problem. For the ecological system, that pesticide use can lead to big problems. When you frame it back in the environmental issue thing, you bring in all the pieces together. And you also look at different impacts within a system. And the neat thing about the way these standards are designed is the students are defining whether it is a problem or an issue, and how it needs to be addressed, and which part of the system is being affected. A lot of times too, we see issues with cause and effect, if someone's to blame or not to blame, or even things like disparity between impacts, such as environmental justice impacts. Okay, go ahead, Michelle.
Okay, so again, we were talking about MIWI supporting practices. And so here are some examples from the teacher's perspective, things to think about. So active teacher support, classroom integration, the local context, and the sustained activity are things that we talked about when we were looking at the words on the outside of the circle. So active teacher support, again, ensuring that the essential elements are supporting the academic goals. Classroom integration, making sure that it is anchored in standards and curriculum. Local contexts, making sure that it's relevant and that there is a collective decision. And sustained activity, again, that the students engage throughout the entire MIWI framework process. Okay, so these are, again, MIWI should be learner-centered and focused on questions, problems, and issues, things that students can investigate through collecting, analyzing, and sharing data, learning about different protocols, exploring models, and examining natural phenomena. And so, there we have it. Slides aren't moving. Okay. Again, it's important to note that outdoor field experiences is part of this process. And there should be multiple outdoor field experiences sufficient to collect enough data to make observations. We want to be able to make sure that the students are able to answer the research questions, and that these answers will support student actions. And then again, student synthesis and conclusions. And again, these words, this process, you can go round and round or back and forth depending on what needs to be done, but students need to be able to analyze and evaluate the results of the projects and the investigations. and synthesize and communicate the results and conclusions to an external audience. So maybe it's another classroom, maybe it's the whole school, parents, or the community. Okay, so stewardship and civic action is the best part of this, I think, but it's often the thing that gets axed because, you know, the school year ends, or we just didn't have time, or like we don't want to get in trouble with anybody. But you know, but it's a really important component of the MIWI because it culminates all of the work that the students have done. And it gives them the opportunity to make a change if needed, to have student voice, youth voice, a very important part, to have them see themselves as part of the community that they live in. And so, you know, we want to emphasize that actions don't need to be hands-on restoration, that they can take many different forms. And so here are a few examples of those. So, you know, watershed restoration or protection is obviously one. Everyday choices, community engagement, and civic action are just some examples of stewardship and civic action.
One of the things that's really important for all of you to realize is that this is not only with the outdoor field experiences, but in this stewardship and civic action component, it's really, really important that the schools understand what the best management practices are, how to really do it, how to be effective, how to select the right plants, how to create, if you're working in a riparian zone, if you're going to do buffers, how to do that. If there's some kind of stream remediation that's part of their project, how to do it the right way. And this is where players like you who are attending the Schuylkill River Watershed Conference really, really need to be a part of the process.
All right, and so just to dig a little deeper, again, restoration and protection, here are some ideas that some groups have done. They're pretty obvious a lot of times. You know, people love planting trees, you know, doing outdoor habitats like rain gardens and those sorts of things. So these are just some types of action around restoration and protection. Everyday choices can include things like energy or water conservation. A lot of times a common one is to, you know, pledge not to run the water while you're brushing your teeth, or to turn out the lights when you leave the room. Some students have instituted, you know, recycling or composting for their schools. And so everyday choices, something we can pledge to do every day. Civic action, you know, we've had groups of youth who will write letters or attend a city council meeting, writing to an elected official, or advocating for change.
One of my favorite ones for this one is we had students who petitioned the legislature to get the Hellbender designated as the state amphibian, and they did it. And with that came an entire educational campaign that they pushed out. So it's really great to see when the kids take it on their own.
And then we have community engagement. So again, working with, you know, thinking about the local impacts that we have, public presentations, that again could be just within their own school or to another class within their school. Social media campaigns are always a popular one. Organizing an event, beach cleanup sometimes are something that students can help organize, and then mentoring and educating others.
So just a couple tools that the schools are using or have access to. And if you're interested in learning how to use these, we also provide trainings through our network. If you go to PA Gateway to Green, you can find out about some of our options. You can find out through the Pennsylvania Sea Grant events and training page, and also through the Stroudwater Research events and training pages. So we have tools that will help you and the educators frame your learning experience so that you're maximizing how many standards you hit, as well as making sure that we're building it in a sound way so the students can develop their knowledge and apply their skills. We're looking at education across multiple systems from natural to human, and want to include as many in the learning experience so the students see that it's just not novel to a stream study, but the things that they're learning can be applied across many platforms. We really want to promote integrative inquiry. We need to look at bringing all these pieces together, and mostly, understanding how you can bring wonder and observations that are grounded in very relevant, meaningful experiences and build an entire course from that experience. Just think of how you've learned about some of your favorite things. Was it sitting and reading a book? Was it watching a movie? Now, those might have been important pieces, but when you really got to feel the experience, that was when all the learning was put together and it clicked. We need to look at how to develop field investigations that go beyond descriptive and venture into comparing and even correlative, which, looking at cause and effect. Or is there a direct connection between the two? Even if there's not a direct cause and effect, is there a connection between the two? We are working on developing frameworks for telling stories about environmental education issues. This is an example of how we're building some questions and skills related to agricultural systems. And think about your area of expertise. How can you build a storyline that students could learn about beginning in kindergarten and continue their learning and growth and skill development and understanding depth and breadth all the way through senior high? Because frequently, if you're working in or near a school district, you're going to have environmental issues that have so many facets that you could build something like that, a curriculum to understand. All of this goes in hand with Pennsylvania's environmental literacy plan. And within that, we're encouraging school districts to develop their own environmental literacy plan that will help them develop not only curriculum, but through this, they identify environmental issues in their community. Hopefully, they'll identify partners through which they can explore in their community. All of you need to raise your hand for that when the call comes out. And they're helping. This helps the schools understand where they need resources and when. So again, this is where you as partners in this learning experience are absolutely essential. What we're trying to do is, through this process, and not just watershed in regard to the flowing water, we're looking at the entire watershed. Our entire watershed systems have been degraded due to a lot of different things. And what we're trying to do through not just the Chesapeake Bay Watershed Agreement goals, but all of our work across Pennsylvania is getting students on board, getting educators on board, so they understand how to act responsibly, how to protect from further damage, and how to restore when possible. We mentioned a couple resources earlier. We have Pennsylvania Gateway to Green. We have Pennsylvania Pathways to Green Schools, Stroud's Wiki Watershed. Suite is amazing as you're trying to learn and build. And then we also, unfortunately, not in the Delaware River Basin, but we're working on it. We're trying to get BWET grants in that region, but there are a bunch of environmental grants across and within the Delaware River Basin that you would have access to. So takeaway, basically, all of what we've just talked about is founded in good educational and science education research. using the watershed education experience, which is actually embedded into our standards, gives you as community partners a great place to make connections with schools. And you can also look at the Environmental Literacy and Sustainability Plan template for your agencies and organizations or your businesses. Look through there, see what environmental issues are in your area, do a version of this for your outreach programs, and see how you can build connections across, your entire watershed. So we have a few minutes for some questions.
Wanted to jump in here because we have a couple questions for you, and anyone who is on can put them in the chat and we will happily pass them along. So one question is, for schools that are looking to expand or improve upon their current environmental education program by becoming involved in local issues, what ways do you suggest as most accessible if there are limitations in time, finances, things like that?
So school-based, school property explorations, everywhere you are in a watershed. If you need assistance in developing things out, we have partners with every IU who are trained in the MIWI. We have partners in every IU who are trained in the STEELS standards. You also have access to resources like PAC grant and her, Michelle's partners. You have access to non-formal education partners such as Bureau of State Parks or places like Stroud or Riverbend. There are a lot of resources out there, and we don't want any educators doing this by themselves. We have lots of partners that we've been prepping and training for the last 7 years in hopes that we would get to where we are now.
I would
Thank
add
you.
also, the Pennsylvania Association of Environmental Educators has a Find EE Near Me link, and I will drop that in the chat. That's another excellent way for formal and non-formal, informal educators to connect, so that no one is doing this alone. I would also note that the link that I just put in the chat for PAEE, if you click the box that says view regional providers here, it splits the state into 6 regional districts. Just chopping a somewhat rectangular state into 6. And within each region, there is a link to the regional director from PAEE, but there's also a link to the regional hub leader for the Pennsylvania Environmental Literacy Network, which Tammy referenced earlier when she was mentioning the some of the statewide work that is happening and being funded currently by a NOAA BWET, a Bay Watershed Education and Training Grant. And so you can connect to others in your region. We encourage people to join their regional hub. I will find the Google form link for that as soon as I stop talking. But that's another way to connect with people so that you are not going alone on these.
Thank you. That's very, very helpful. Tammy, is there anything else you wanted to add to that? Okay. I think we have a new question from Carol in our chat. I'm looking to find it.
So I see Carol's comment about
Yes.
the science activities and the Fish and Boat Commission. And one of the things that when we do trainings related to anyone who wants to do watershed or water-based collection, we do tell them about the conservation permit. We're very firm about that. one of the other things that we talk to them about is, the need for older students there's a certain level where your students might have to get fishing licenses, but if they are studying with you when you have the conservation permit, and or if you are at a Bureau of State Parks facility working with their educators, they all have the education permit, which is another good reason why you should have partnerships with non-formal educators. Now, so that is a very important piece. The neat thing about it is, too, you can do water quality monitoring and enter your data through Wiki Watershed's resources as well.
Can you tell me a little bit about Wiki Watersheds?
So so Wiki Watershed is a suite of tools from Stroudwater Research Center. Let me stop sharing for a second and I can just pull that up and to give them some free publicity. So Wiki Watershed is a tool suite where you can actually play around with different parameters and functions. There's a Model My Watershed where you can manipulate ground cover to see if changes in ground cover will affect stormwater runoff. We have the runoff simulation as well. The Monitor My Watershed is where you can enter data. There's some stuff on the DYI. They have the Leaf Pack Network. Oh, the microinvertebrates.org is one of the absolute coolest things. In years past, we've seen Stroud do presentations about this at the Congress, at the Schuylkill Congress. But I'm going to pick one of my favorite guys. I like the stoneflies. So you can zoom in on these pictures. And what they did was they took thousands of micro level photos and created 3D views of these critters. You can get in, you can see all the details. It's just absolutely amazing. And what's neat is you can be out in the field and do your collection and then come back in. The kids now have seen something that's relevant, and now they can dig in and learn the details about it. And it works so much better when you scale from something of an experience into deeper than if you try to start with like some big intangible idea and zoom in. It works so much better if you go in the direction that we just suggested.
Thank you. That's actually really incredible. And it looks like it'd be a great resource for coming up with different lesson plans, maybe even basing some labs off of that. That sounds incredible.
Yeah. And Stroud has lesson plans associated with most of their resources. State Parks has a huge number of resources. Most of the NGOs in the environmental field have amazing lesson plans and resources, so educators don't have to start from scratch. And if you're in an organization where you're trying to develop the resources, you can also use their resources as models.
That's wonderful to know. I know that teachers tend to be fairly pressed for time, so having to reinvent the wheel for every lesson is something that I'd like to avoid if possible. I have one final question because we're out of time at this point. One thing you would share with environmental educators, no matter where they work, about how to get kids interested. What's the hook? Like, what one lesson plan would you start with, or one question? What do you think really gets people interested and keeps them coming back to learn more?
Michelle, what do you think?
So I just want to say, like, your environment is where you are. You don't always have to go to a creek or a forest or any of these places. And as someone who lives and works in Philadelphia a lot, that may just be the school grounds, which may be blacktop or, you know, concrete or whatever. So don't frame things like you know, you have to go somewhere to be in the environment. The environment is where you are. And so going outdoors, no matter what it is outdoors, is and wondering, right? Like asking the questions, letting students observe. I went to a school the other day and another person had been the week before. And when I came in, they said, the woman last week brought us turtles. What do you have? And I said, we're going outside. And they went, woo! So it didn't matter that I thought I was going to lose to turtles, because quite frankly, turtles rock. But the idea that we were just going to go outside and look around the school building was enough that they were super excited. So, you know, go outside, explore your environment.
Yeah, and I echo that. One of the things that I have found over the years, it doesn't matter what you're studying, it's letting the kids state their wonders and their questions out loud, and that everything is right. All of your questions are valid. And if the kids feel that they have a safe place to ask questions and are allowed to touch and do, and no one's telling them something's wrong unless they're in danger, they'll want to keep doing it. It's when you tell them to stop wondering that we start to lose kids.
Thank you so much for that. So exploration and embracing inquiry. That's a wonderful thing to end on. I think something that we could all do a little bit more of in our lives. I have to wrap it up at this moment. So I want to thank our speakers, Tammy Peffer, Michelle Niedermeyer. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your expertise. I know it was greatly informative to all of us. I certainly learned a lot. Thank you, everyone, and we will see you next year at the 2025 Watershed Congress.